My guest is Dr. Alan Lindsay, and many viewers will recognise him as the presenter of the Keepers of the Flame series, and more recently he was also the historical consultant for the Tell the World movie. But more important, Dr. Lindsay, you were my teacher many years ago in Adventist history, and I have many fond memories of those days. And here we are in front of the home where Ellen White lived for 4 years while living here in Australia, and Dr. Lindsay is going to show us around this house. Thanks, Dr. Lindsay. So, Dr. Lindsay, we're in the first room just as you walk in. Tell us about it.
We're fairly sure, Gary, that this was Ellen White's bedroom.
Okay.
You'll see the bed here, the pieces of furniture in here belong to Ellen White. There are photographs on the wall, James White, her husband, and Ellen White. An interesting chart here that belonged to the William Miller movement that was actually discovered inside this little desk, and it was in a hidden compartment in this desk, which is interesting. As we stand in this room, Gary, I always think that because Ellen White had many visions, and her visions while she was here in Australia were always night visions, not given during the day. So it would be in this room that angels came and visited her while she was living here in her home.
Wonderful. Let's keep moving on. This way?
Yes, this way. There's some interesting photographs and pictures here in this room. Yes, the painting up here by an Australian Adventist painter, Eric Weir, is taken off a photograph. In fact, it was the only photograph that we had taken while Ellen White was in Australia, way back in 1899. There are other pictures of interest as we look around this room. The photograph over here is of Ellen White's son, who lived with her here in Australia, Willie White, W.C. White as he's sometimes known, with his second wife, who happened to be an Australian girl. And the two girls behind are two daughters from his first wife, who unfortunately died in 1890. There were twins born while Ellen White was here, and you can see the two boys as they grew up. Ellen White was very proud of these two boys that were born. And here is a well-known photograph, Ellen White on the left, James White, and the two surviving sons. She had 4 boys altogether, lost 2 of them in 1 at 3 months, one at 16 years of age, but the 2 surviving ones became ministers of the church, Willie White and James Edson White.
Great. Lead us on, yeah. So, Dr. Lindsay, when Ellen White was here, what sort of writings did she tend to focus on? What did she produce while in this house?
Well, the very significant production that was made here, Gary, was Desire of Ages. I mean, Desire of Ages is one of the 5 Conflict of the Ages books, and Desire of Ages is possibly the most wonderful of the 5. It's on the life of Jesus. She finished it here in 1898. That was just 2 years before she left to go back to the United States.
Okay.
That book originally was much bigger than it is today. Thoughts from the Mount of Blessing on the Sermon on the Mount, and also Christ's Object Lessons on the parables. That was taken out of the original Desire of Ages because it proved too big a book.
Yes.
So she did that, and then she began to write a great deal. In fact, between 1897 and 1899, she wrote more on Christian education than at any other time in her life. And that was because she was leading out in establishing the Avondale College, which is nearby.
Fascinating. And this room we're in here?
We're not quite sure what this room was originally. It may have been connected to the kitchen, but we think the kitchen was more outside and connected to the home. But we have some interesting objects in this room as well, particularly over here. Is the only photograph we have of Ellen White in Sunnyside, and that's just as Sunnyside looks today. You can see Ellen White there in the doorway, the main doorway, with some of her workers. So this was an interesting room, but only more because it was connected more to the dining room, which is next door. There are some pieces of furniture here that belong to Ellen White, and certainly in this room there are a number of pieces of furniture that belong to Ellen White. This dining room table, that was hers. And you can see seating 6 people, but many of the significant leaders of the church, General Conference President, Pastor Daniels, who was the President of the Australian Union, they would come here, and many were entertained by Ellen White at her table. One of the very interesting features of this room is a book that is really an autograph album. It was This book was given to Ellen White just a few days before she left Australia on the boat to go back to the United States. It has many interesting stories in it, mainly because these people were writing to Ellen White a little message that she was to read on her way back to the United States. A particularly interesting part of this book is a page that was written by Nathaniel Davis. Nathaniel Davis, Gary, was a worker here in Australia in the late 1890s, and he came and visited this home, met Ellen White in the front room, and there she told him that he was involved in spiritualism. He was actually controlled by an evil spirit. And there were many anxious moments. The next night after her visit, she was given a vision about Nathaniel Davis. The problems that he had, not only with spiritualism, evidently he had problems with money and handling of money, even involved to a certain extent in immorality. And so she wrote a letter to Nathaniel Davis and was very concerned about him. To cut a long story short, she eventually was so concerned that she asked Pastor Daniels, the General Conference President, to be in the next few years, and asked him to take a message, a letter from her, to Nathaniel Davis. But she didn't trust Nathaniel Davis to read anything from her. And so she asked Pastor Daniels to read the letter. He read the letter. We have a dramatic description of that letter afterwards, as he told it, when Nathaniel Davis threw a knife at Pastor Davis when he was being Daniels when he was being controlled by this evil spirit. He eventually, after a season of prayer, was released from this spirit. When in the autograph album, and he heard about the album, he wrote one of these autographs, and I'm going to read it to you. It affords me the most sincere pleasure to have the privilege of putting on record my appreciation of Sister White's work and my gratitude to my Heavenly Father for the messages sent through her to his people. The faithful witness thus born revealed to me the means whereby the bondage of Satan was broken, when owing to the influence of spiritualism, I had well nigh become a spiritual wreck. I have every reason to be positive in my confidence in Sister White as a true prophet. And it was signed by Nathaniel Davis in Geelong, Victoria, in August 1900.
Fantastic.
But this book represents a lot of very interesting stories of people who were blessed by Ellen White when she lived here in this home.
Yeah, Dr. Lindsay, thank you so much for this. Some of the insights of, so many stories happened in this building. Thank you so much.